Let's get real. There's nothing worse than being hit with those dreaded words, I can't afford it. And it carries a particularly frustrating sting because it feels like you've wasted your time or that you're so close, but that you can't nail why you keep hearing those words. And you've convinced yourself that it's just because you keep getting the wrong people. Why? Because if they can't afford your services, it makes them the wrong people. And the typical advice had been to just find more affluent clients because if they have more money, they won't say they can't afford it. So you try up leveling your branding and your marketing, trying to get more high level clients. But guess what? You're just going to hear another version of the same objection. Why? Because I can't afford it isn't a sales problem, it's a marketing problem. And it goes against everything you've been hearing. But this is important, and it's exactly what we're going to tackle here today because when we think of objections as sales problems, we try to solve the sales problem or the sales call. So you may add a closer thinking that you'd rather just outsource it to someone else, and you'll get a sales coach trying to teach you how to overcome objections and learn how to push or coach people through it. Or you'll book more calls just to make up for the number of no's you've been hearing, being told that that's just a natural part of sales. But newsflash, all you're doing is solving the wrong problem. And that means your efforts are only exasperating the problem or diverting it. Think of it this way: hiring a closer is just diverting the broken system to someone else. So you're not fixing it, you're just throwing the problem on someone else's lap, which means as you grow and scale, that problem will continue to magnify. And booking more calls is just exasperating the problem. Now, instead of spending 3 hours on calls a week, you're spending six just to get 1 to 2 yeses. That's not ideal. So, real talk, hearing I can't afford it is a sign of an ineffective marketing strategy. And I'm going to show you the 3 sneaky causes for I can't afford it and how to resolve this week without pressure or building a new funnel. Now, hey, and welcome back to the Business Real Talk. On this episode, we are going to dive deep into the number one most frustrating objection we hear, which is I can't afford it. Now, what I'm about to share with you is why that there are 3 sneaky, simple causes that lead to hearing I can't afford it and why it's so important for you to understand those first and foremost and how we can actually go about resolving that this week without needing pressure or to learn some sneaky or slimy sales strategy to try and pressure people to get there or trying to build some brand new funnel to try and reinvent the wheel. We're not going to do that. Now, let's jump into the good stuff. AKA the other side of what it looks like when you're no longer hearing, I can't afford it. Because what I want you to understand and here, right now, is that you're not bad at sales. Your marketing just isn't doing the heavy lifting of moving people to a state of being ready to buy. Now, what I want to share with you is that I have had dozens, if not more than dozens, of clients who've come to me stating that they just felt like they were bad at sales, feeling like they were frustrated because they were hearing, I can't afford it so often. And it felt like they were never able to get past that. And that they just needed to find the secret door or the secret idea to how to actually find people who could afford their services. My client Steph was a great example of this. She came to me saying that she hated sales calls. And I hear this all the time. She had decided that she was bad at sales and that she only had 2 options to solve that. Number one was to hire a sales team to take over for her, which was expensive and frustrating because now she had to learn how to manage a team, which wasn't something she was really looking to do. Or she had to book more sales calls and just handle it, just handle the fact that having and hearing I can't afford it is just a natural part of business. Now, for reference, she had hired an expensive sales coach that taught her to use a call close. One call was to create demand, and the other one was to close them. And she was spending hours on calls as it was, only to still hear I can't afford it. Now, truth bomb, sales do not happen on sales calls. I want you to hear that again. Sales do not happen on sales calls. I said this a lot, but I really want that to sink in for you because so often people are hating the sales process, whether that's on calls or on DMs or on live launching, wherever and however you're creating sales conversions in your business. You're most likely frustrated because you're using that singular event to create sales. Okay. So this might look like you are using sales calls, but you're having to sell on those sales calls, or you're using DMs, but you're having to sell in the DMs, or you're using live launches, but you're having to sell in the live launch. Now, I know that sounds a little wonky because you're like, yeah, Nas, of course I am. That's what I've been taught to do. But what I want you to understand is that when it comes to sales, any type of sales conversion formula that we're using, that should be a formality. It should be a way for you to support them in understanding how it applies to them. But when we have effective marketing, our sales are actually happening over the time of your marketing process. So with Steph, that's exactly what we did. Within 30 days, we made a shift. We focused on getting her marketing to create demand, eliminating that first call that she was taking altogether, and instead then structured her sales calls so that she no longer had to sell. Instead, they were coming onto that call ready to buy. She was just confirming that they were a good fit for her. That's the shift we want to make. So, the very first reason, and probably the sneakiest culprit to why we hear I can't afford it, is that you may be speaking to the right people, but the wrong level of intent. Now, let me explain what I mean about this because we've been taught on how to actually identify the right people as our ideal client avatar. So, you've probably done dozens of exercises around ideal client avatars and trying to identify who they are, what they look like, what book they're reading, all those things, right? The psychographics and the demographics. And while those things aren't necessarily wrong, they're not actually helping you identify their intent. And intent is going to be the single biggest driving factor to getting people who want to make a purchasing decision. Okay. So here's what you need to understand. If you speak to somebody who may seem like the right person on paper, meaning they have the problem, they are, at a certain level, they fit all the right parameters that you have on paper, but they haven't made solving their problem a priority, then you are effectively speaking to the wrong person. So, plain and simple, if it is not a priority to your client, then they are not the right client. That means even if what you're offering, what your solution is something that they need, if they do not want it, if they do not have a desire around it, no amount of convincing on your part will change that. I want you to hear that because we've probably been taught the opposite for so long. I see it in the 20 years I've been in marketing. We've been taught to do the opposite of this. So, what we've been told is that there's a certain level of convincing in the process, and that we kind of need to help people understand why they should care about that problem and why solving that problem should be a priority and why we're the person that should help them solve that. It sounds silly when you hear it. When you hear me saying that, you're saying to yourself, no, I don't want to do that. Yet your marketing and your messaging is inadvertently achieving that, is inadvertently putting you in a position to speak to someone who does not want to solve their problem. So here's what I want you to understand because you might have seen this happen and play out, and it might be the most frustrating thing for you. You may have spoken to a person who told you that they couldn't afford your social media services, yet they may turn around and spend double of what they said they couldn't afford with you on a sales coach. Now, why? Because they've prioritized sales and not content. Same thing goes with that person who tells you they can't afford your life coaching services, but then they turn around and pay a celebrity psychic the same amount that you were charging for your services. The reality is that person has prioritized something else. And no matter what you do, you can lead that horse to water, but you cannot force them to drink. It is your marketing and your messaging's job to ensure that you're speaking to people with the right intent. I call this the intent triangle, and I'm not going to go into detail around this. And it's something I've seen in business owners who have been doing this for 15, 20 years, who have been around the block, who have hit seven figures still, but are still feeling like they're playing the numbers game and trying to get a small number of people who are ready to work with them by having to churn through a large number of leads. Now, what you need to understand, and one of the biggest factors to this in what I call the intent triangle, is what I call the snowball effect. Now, simply put, the snowball effect means that we want to speak to people who are already in motion. Okay. Think about a snowball going down the hill. We don't want to be starting from scratch and telling people they should build a snowball. We shouldn't be convincing them that they need to do that. They should already have a snowball that they've shaped. They started to roll. It's starting to create that form and that shape, and they're moving it in, but it's just not getting there fast enough. So the snowball effect means that we are speaking to people with intent to take action. Now, I can't say this enough, but when you nail this, when you master this, it's a simple shift that allows you to speak to people who are already in motion, meaning you're going to get faster conversions. You're going to get people who are willing to do the work and willing to invest in solving that problem. So, what this looks like is you either have a choice right now to either be the priority for the right people with the right intent, or you're going to choose to be the nice to have for people with the wrong intent. Intent will absolutely be the single biggest factor in bringing in and moving people in your pipeline so you can avoid hearing, I can't afford it. So I want you to walk away with step number one to focus on people who are actively looking for a way to solve the problem rather than speaking to people who either don't know they have a problem or aren't prioritizing it. So let me give you a quick example using messaging to help you identify what this actually looks like. An example of speaking to low intent is going to be 5 reasons why you should start a Facebook group. Instead of an example of high intent messaging is going to be how to turn your Facebook group into a sales system in just 14 days. You see the difference in that? In the low intent version, I'm trying to convince someone that they should care about starting a Facebook group. They have maybe never thought about it or it's not high on their priority list of things to solve. Versus when I speak to high intent, I'm speaking to someone who's already in motion, who's already prioritized either starting a Facebook group or turning their Facebook group into a sales system. Now, what that's allowing me to do is identify the segment within your audience who's already ready to take action. This is going to allow you to speak to people who are prioritizing solving the problem. Another example using a weight loss coach would be 5 ways that excess weight is affecting your health. You can see straight away that that's low intent messaging because it's speaking to convincing people they should care about the excess weight they have on their body because it's affecting their health. Instead of speaking to someone who knows they have a problem and is actively seeking a way to solve it. Using high intent messaging, it would look more like this: how my client lost 20 pounds in 2 months without going to the gym. I'm speaking to someone who knows they want to lose 20 pounds. They know they want to do that as quickly as possible, and they don't want to do it using the gym. It's something they've tried before. That's me leveraging the snowball effect to speak to the right people. So now that we've covered reason number one and why you may be speaking to the right people, but with the wrong intent, let's dive into reason number two. Now, this is another really sneaky one, and it's that they don't have enough information to make a buying decision. Now, one of the biggest mistakes I see happening is that people think of their marketing and their sales as completely different entities. Now, the problem with this is that realistically, they should be working together cohesively in order to create the result we want, which is to get more clients. Now, what we're doing instead is we're leveraging our marketing to create interest, but not create demand, which means that we're leveraging our sales process to get people to buy. And that can look like being on hour-long sales calls or hearing I can't afford it or feeling like it's taking a really long time to get people interested enough to get on that sales call or to make a purchasing decision. So what we want to do instead is really leverage our marketing and shift that so it's creating demand and not simply interest. Now, a few months ago, I pissed a lot of people off by saying that I can't afford it is a sign of an ineffective marketing strategy and that it had nothing to do with sales at all. Now, what it really means is if you think about it, the way we've been taught up until this point to do marketing is that we're just trying to get people to be interested enough to get to that point of telling me more. So you'll see this a lot on Instagram right now when people are leveraging 7-second reels where they're just trying to get people to say, tell me more. And if your marketing right now is just set up to get people to say, I want to learn more, then you're not actually creating demand, you're just creating interest. And this can look like masterclasses that either give too much information or not enough. So people are getting left having to get on a sales call in order to learn more. Now, I want to be clear, your sales calls are not a place to learn more. They should be a place where they're making decisions. Now, when we create demand through our marketing, people are now coming to those sales calls ready to buy. So if you're frustrated by your sales process, feeling like it's dragging people through, it means that we need to shift the way we do our marketing. So we're creating intent to purchase rather than simply creating intent to learn. That's why a great example of this is when people get into my DMs, they say, I haven't booked a call yet and I can't wait to. I'm just trying to get my ducks in a row so I can sign on, or I'm just finishing out this program and I can't wait to book a call with you. They're coming into my sales call with an intent to purchase rather than trying to pick my brain or get more information. Your marketing should be giving them the right information so it's creating enough demand so that those sales calls become fit checks, places for you and them to decide if it's the right fit. Now, if you're not doing this, it means that our marketing needs to take a step up. It needs to be able to do some of that heavy lifting. One of the key ways that we do this is actually giving the information that allows people to make those buying decisions. So in our case, we leverage a method based selling system, which means through our content, rather than just getting people excited enough to say, this sounds interesting, we're trying to give them the breakdown of how we actually create that result so that they can actually come in with demand and purchasing intent. If your marketing isn't doing this, then you're setting yourself up to have to constantly sell on sales calls and have to juggle those different objections that you're hearing. Instead, what you want to be doing is shifting your marketing so it's focusing on creating demand rather than simply creating interest. Now, the third and final reason that we're going to tackle today is that your value doesn't match your price tag. Now, this can be really frustrating to hear because you're probably sitting there saying, Naz, I know what I do is really freaking valuable. So, what am I supposed to do in order to get my value to match the price tag? Now, the reality is, and a lot of people don't like to hear this, is that to charge more, you have to have a higher perceived value. If the person across the phone from you feels like it sounds like something else they've heard before or something they could find anywhere else, they're going to price scan. That means they're going to look for a cheaper solution. Your personality is not going to increase the perceived value. And it doesn't mean that you need to bulk up your offer. Quite the opposite. Leaning out your offer is the best way to go. But instead, what you need to be able to do is make it where they don't have something else to compare to. Let me give you an example of what I mean by this. If right now you're selling life coaching services, or you're selling ad strategy, or you're selling the ability to write copy for a sales page, you're giving them something that's a commodity, something they can find anywhere else and probably do so for cheaper. So you're creating a comparison trap where you're using the mechanism to compare one thing to another. This is one of the biggest mistakes I see people making, even when they have a high value service, is that they're kind of hiding behind the modalities or mechanisms that they're using. I see this oftentimes with healers who oftentimes will talk about how they use Reiki or hypnosis or, energy healing instead of speaking to the magic, which is them. This is where methodology comes into play because when we speak to our methodology, we remove the comparison trap, meaning that you're no longer compared to another life coach or another copywriter or another Reiki healer. You're instead creating a methodology that creates no comparison because it's not just coaching that you're doing. You have a method behind your life coaching that makes it more effective than everyone else out there. It's your job to be able to create that value behind your methodology by clearly articulating and communicating that methodology. If you don't currently have a method, step one should be go create your methodology. And if you have a methodology, but you're not communicating that, or your methodology is rooted in speaking to things that people could readily find on the internet, then your methodology isn't going to do the heavy lifting of creating a value that matches that higher price tag. So, what this looks like is actually shifting our marketing to speak to a methodology that clearly articulates and communicates a value far beyond what they're seeing right now. So, here's an example of what it looks like to shift your marketing and your messaging so that your perceived value increases. Now, let's say that you're somebody who helps people create ads that convert, and that's great, Jim, but so can a person on Fiverr. And my cousin Jill just learned ads, so I can just save money and work with her. But instead, when we shift and we position your perceived value around your unique or innovative method, your approach that's unmatched and incomparable, now we're able to create a higher perceived value that makes you absolutely incomparable. So let's say instead we spoke to your storytelling conversion method and we speak to the fact that people buy when they feel something. Your ads are meant to tell a story that connects them to that feeling and lets them feel deeply connected to you and to your process. So they're buying without any hesitation. Now, our storytelling compelling conversion method turns your ads into a story adventure. So people are excited and eager to buy without spending hours on marketing. You see the difference? Rather than me speaking to the fact that I help people create ads that convert, I'm speaking to my methodology. I'm speaking to a process that's unique and innovative and does something that nobody else can, therefore making it where my solution becomes incomparable. This allows me to increase my perceived value and have people jumping on the idea of working with me. It's the difference between hearing I can't afford it on sales calls and hearing let me find the funds. This is exactly what I've needed. Now, what I want you to really think about and what we've really tapped into to here today is that no matter how you look at it, I can't afford it isn't actually a sales problem. Objections are something that we hear when our marketing hasn't been effective and actually driving results. Ultimately, what we want to be able to do is have a marketing strategy that creates demand and gets people saying yes before they even get on sales calls. And this is the power behind the Easy Yes method because we focus on creating inbound demand so your clients are ready to buy before you've even opened your mouth on a sales call. And here's exactly what it breaks down to. Step number one is creating your innovative gap methodology. This looks at where the gap in the market is and how you can actually come in and swoop in and save the day, leveraging your innovative gap methodology. This allows you to charge 5 to 10 times higher prices than you were before and have clients who are happily ready to invest in working with you because they know that you're the only solution to their problem. Step number two is having what we call the bingeable sales system. This allows your audience to make micro decisions over an automated conversion system so that by the time you're getting on calls with your potential clients, they're already saying yes before you even opened your mouth. And step three is having what we call a results and retention system. This is how we create pure profit by getting your clients incredible results every single time, even at scale. This allows you to systemize your delivery system so you're getting clients world-class results every single time without you always being on. This is the power behind what drives the Easy Yes method and why our clients are able to get their leads to sell themselves using the Netflix effect. And as you know, I want to invite you to the next step because if you sat here and you said to yourself, all I want is a system that helps me bring in the right people, helps me convert those people, and helps me have clients that are getting amazing success stories. So they're shouting from the rooftops about you. I want to invite you to book your growth optimization call. This call happens directly with me. You and I will sit down. I'll do an audit on your current sales and marketing process and show you exactly where you've been leaving money on the table and how the Easy Yes method can help. Head on over to easyesleads.com/call to book a call right now. But if you want to learn how the Easy Yes method works and how you can get your leads to sell themselves with a marketing and sales ecosystem that does the heavy lifting for you, head on over to easyesleads.com to check out the mini series now. Now, as always, we love and appreciate when you rate, subscribe, and share this episode with a friend. So remember, if you're hearing I can't afford it, it's a sign of an ineffective marketing strategy, and it's much easier than you think to solve. But until next time, here's to keeping it real.